I'm going to show you a game by one of the most talented juniors in the world, Alireza Firouzja from Iran. Before we look at the game, remember, if you're not a subscriber, then do click on the button below. It's very simple. One click will do the job. Right, so Alireza Firouzja, only 15 years old. What a talent. He's the current Iranian champion. He's already Iranian champion in 2016 at the age of 12. He came 6th in the World Rapid Championships in St. Petersburg at the end of December, which is an extraordinary result. I think that just shows the kind of talent he has. In this World Team Championship, obviously playing for Iran, and he scored 7 out of 9. He really is something special. In fact, Iran has so many strong players coming through now. Current World Junior Champion Parham Maghsood is worth watching out for. But I think Firouzja, you know, he has the edge at the moment. So this game was played in the Iran-Kazakhstan match. So his opponent, Petr Kostenko from Kazakhstan. It's a French classical variation. I'm interested in this from both sides. I've played this with both colours. And Firouzja decides to just push on and play in a very classical way. And this position after bishop e3 is a starting point of so many different variations. Black plays in the most straightforward way now with a6 and b5, but you can also simply play bishop e7 in this position. This has a pretty good reputation as well. You can also take here and play bishop c5, also possible. But a6 and b5, so black is getting counterplay going on the queen side straight away. Lots of ways for white to play this. a3 is possible, you can take on c5. Firouzja plays bishop d3, which is a very interesting system, not played very often, but not to be underestimated, as we're about to see. I remember Wei Yi playing this a few years ago in Firouzja. He won a beautiful game, Firouzja 2015. It looks funny to allow black's pawns to push forward, but in fact after this, yes, black has gained space on the queen side, but actually white has security because there's no longer pressure on the pawn on d4. But it's a double-edged position. That's how the Wei Yi game went. But instead, Kostenko played queen b6. So putting more pressure on d4, and simply queen f2, supporting d4. And this was exchanged off. Bishop c5 is possible here, but Kostenko played in a very straightforward way, just exchanging pieces. And here's an interesting moment in the game. Knight e2 has been played before, and that's a reasonable move, but I suspect that Firouzja didn't want to allow the pawn to come to b4, which gives black more space. Instead, he played in a very sort of strict positional way, exchanging here and playing b4. It's a common idea in this system, actually, that you advance this pawn and try and fix these pawns on light squares, and that means it's much harder for this bishop to actually reach a good diagonal. So obviously you can see if black's pawn had come to b4, that would have given black more space. And here is it's actually a very difficult moment for black, where you have to decide how you place your pawns. Do you try and shake things up? Do you go into an ending? You know, you could play an endgame here. The big danger is if you don't shake white's bind, then white has a beautiful good knight against bad bishop position. But black does have the breaks a5 and f6 and potentially g5 as well. But as I said, it's a double-edged way for black to play, because if you don't shake white's bind, then you're in massive trouble. So Kostenko tried d4, which is very understandable because it opens this diagonal for the bishop. Of course, with the threat of knight d6, then the king has to castle. Bishop b7. So that bishop has at least found its way to the long diagonal, but you could say both players have strong minor pieces. Black's problem is that white has a very natural initiative on the king side. This pawn can't be allowed to go to f6, so that has to be exchanged off. And that brings the knight to this terrific square on f5. Kasparov always used to say that this was his favourite attacking formation with a knight on f5, and you can understand why, because that knight can potentially check the king here from e7 or h6. It also looks at g7 in front of the king, and in combination with the queen, it's extremely dangerous. So the immediate threat is knight e7, forking king and bishop. So black prevents that, and the rook comes across. Now this is a really interesting position. I think white is already has a tremendous position, but I just wanted to show you one particular tactical idea in this position. I should say that black now played queen g6, and we'll return to the game in a second, but let me just go into a little bit of detail in this position. So I was wondering, well, what happens if black tries to find counterplay by giving this rook an open file down here? Well, first of all, let's take, and we'll drag the rook up the board. That's significant because now black's back rank is weaker. Now, if white attacks with queen g3, then that can be met with queen g6. But it's here that white has a beautiful move, e6, and this is all about interference. So first of all, let's deal with these alternatives. If pawn takes, then this forces checkmate. If rook takes, then queen comes in. Or if rook takes, then this loses to knight h6. So rook takes, and then rook e8 mate, and if pawn takes, then queen f7. So in this position, after e6, bishop takes, and now queen g3, you can see the problems that have been created with the rook off the back rank. So the rooks are now split, can't protect each other, can't cover the back rank. So queen g3 obviously threatens mate, and bishop takes knight impossible because of rook takes rook. Only one sensible way to parry mate, and that's to play g6, and now the knight comes in, check, and takes on f7 with this kind of idea, queen e5, and if this is taken, then actually white's queen comes in, and this is a winning attack. If the king goes backwards, then queen f8 is mate, and this leads to mate like this. Typical idea, you drag the king up the board, and that allows white to get in there, and this is winning. Well, okay, I could go to the end, but I think we've gone too far in this variation anyway. But I think this is such a beautiful move, e6. I know I've kind of constructed it by playing this idea of a5 and rook takes a5, but I was just curious to see what would happen if black, tried to get to counterplay. But what a move, e6. Right, back to reality. This is the position. a5 did not occur. Instead, queen g6 played, which of course looks very natural. The queen comes over to defend its own king and also looks at g2. But Firouzja played very coolly here. If knight takes pawn, then queen takes pawn here. But he just played rook e2, very calm. Giving a little bit more protection to the g2 pawn. And simply threatening to play queen takes. And that's what happened. Now again, quite a brave move actually. Queen takes. But Firouzja has clearly worked out the tactics very well indeed. So for example, if black tries a discovered attack here, bishop takes, then knight e7 check is winning instantly. Again, back rank problems. If black's king steps out of the way, trying to avoid these tricks, then knight d6 is very unpleasant. The knight goes back to this lovely outpost, cuts communication here, so the bishop is threatened. Remember, white is pawn up, and this looks just very, very good. This is threatened, the bishop is threatened. So coming back, white is just taken here. So black tried f6. Now this really does just blow open the position, because you can see that the king is now more exposed. It's all about the tactics. And there's a pin here. There's still some pressure here. Firouzja's calculation at this point was excellent. He played queen b6. Now I'd say that is not an obvious move by any stretch of the imagination, but it's very, very powerful. So first thing to note is that knight e7 check is the threat. Forking king and queen, and if rook takes, then queen takes rook. So knight e7 is the threat here. So king h8 played. Knight e7 came anyway. Again, not an easy one to see. This needs to be calculated very carefully. Obviously it can't be taken because the rook is on prise. If queen takes pawn, then white can take here, and that leads to checkmate. So after knight e7, the queen dropped, and pawn takes pawn. So white has broken through basically. Bishop came back. But the way that the game was finished was very nice. Knight f5, attacking the queen. Queen came here, and now killer move, queen d4 check. If rook takes queen, then rook takes rook. Well, let's just show. And the rook drops on d4. So we'll come back here. So after queen d4 check, the king came here, and knight e7 check. So now the king can't move away. This has to be taken. If rook takes, then queen takes is obviously winning. The rook is going to drop. So in the game, black played queen takes, but simply rook takes queen, and that was the final move of the game. If rook takes queen, then rook takes rook check, and rook takes bishop, and white is a rook up. So that's the final position. Well, I was really impressed by that. I like the way that Firouzja played with a very clear strategic aim with this move b4. But after that, you know, his attack with f5 was really deadly, and he calculated extremely well around about this point when he played rook e2. Looks like a slow move, but actually he'd clearly seen that he's in control in this position. Right, well, I hope you enjoyed that, and I have a funny feeling we're going to be seeing a lot more from Ali Reza Firouzja in the future. Remember, he's only 15 years old.